Savanna. How's it going?
It is going well. I am in an office. I just did a very quick lightning readout of the FinOps, State of FinOps data that
Ooh,
was just published, and I put together the quickest PowerPoint I think I've ever made in my life.
she's
So
doing well.
we're ready to go.
Just before we do as well, I have a little announcement call out that I want for everybody listening. So this is very specific. Savannah doesn't know what I'm talking about.
Oh no.
We want to hear from more customers. So something that we're going to do is we want to make sure that we give your opinions, your voices directly to product owners. So I'm actually asking everybody as an initiative to raise more product feature requests. So these are things that you raise for suggestions for what you want to change in an account. So for example, account names being in the kern might be a good example, which is now in data export in Kern 2.0. So we do listen and we do raise stuff. And recently we've seen that customers maybe think, that's just the way it is. I don't need to raise it because it's never going to happen. Don't believe it. So what I want everyone to do, and I have specific ones, is if you care about this, and only if you care about this, if you care about getting organizational unit data in Cost Explorer, then go to your account, go to your support and raise a feature request, or speak to your account team and ask them to raise this for you. And please use this kind of name, and also tell them that you saw it on this show, that you saw it here now and people were excited about it. I'm not making any promises, but we want to see if you guys can provide some feedback on why we should do this, because I think this is a good idea. I don't know about you, Savannah, if you think this is something that customers should have. Awesome.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah,
that
and
was
when
go for it.
ooh,
No,
sorry,
you're
when
good.
you I'm all thrown off with this new hour-long slot. When you do raise those support cases, make sure it's a billing support case. Remember to provide your company name, your title as appropriate, and you can either say product feature request or PFR in the support case. Same thing goes for reaching out to any of the AWS staff who support you directly. That if it is in a support case, just make sure that it's super clear kind of what you're asking for and where to add that PFR for our support staff.
Perfect. Okay. Thanks for indulging me there, everybody. Let's get back to our regular programming, which is all about the State of FinOps survey. So when you were reviewing it, do you want to do a good summary of what this is, Savannah?
Yeah, absolutely. So the State of FinOps is something that the FinOps Foundation does every year, and it is basically a big survey that goes out in, I believe, December, and folks from all over the community kind of chime in, share their experiences, share their top priorities, and then the FinOps Foundation collates all that data and kind of draws conclusions from it and publishes it and makes it available for everybody to look at and use. In my daily life, I find it really helpful, especially when I'm kind of working with newer customers who are just getting started, to talk about kind of how to look around corners and to share some of the hurdles that other customers are getting over. It's also, I found, really helpful to help people not feel as alone if they're having a specific struggle, because they can kind of look at the data and say, okay, this is a very common thing that people run into. Maybe I can reach out to my peers through the FinOps Foundation and kind of get some hints on how other people have solved this. So overall, really interesting data set. They do an amazing job making sure that everything is presented really clearly and pulling some really interesting pieces out of kind of the data that they do collect.
Yeah, I love the idea of sharing it with other customers. I mean, like, it's not just you, it's all of us. I had the High School Musical, we're all in this together for a second in my head. So that, I think that's a great call out. And for us as content creators, I think it's also interesting. I use that a lot to figure out kind of what are interesting things that are happening in FinOps worlds and how we could create some information or go and seek out some new learnings to share with people. So I think it'd be really cool for us to dive into this.
But I pulled out a couple things that I thought were a little bit interesting and surprising that we could talk about, and then a couple other kind of data points that I thought were expected, like definitely expected to see them, but we can still kind of chat about what that looks like for folks.
Okay,
So
go for it.
yeah, so the number one thing that jumped out to me with the first read through and kind of the first peruse was the fact that it seems like a lot of folks are flagging that they're kind of getting that optimization of compute spend under control, getting their hands around that a little bit, but haven't always kind of gone outside of the compute realm so far.
Mhm.
I think, I don't know if this is consistent with your experience, Steph, but I would say in the last probably year to 2 years, I've seen my customers definitely get that um, RI savings plan strategy kind of dialed in and move on to other services, whether it be kind of the low hanging fruit in S3, EBS, et cetera, and really kind of hone in on some of those more, I guess, technically deep optimization opportunities. So it's interesting to see that maybe some of those folks are ahead of the curve here. This is something that kind of the broader ecosystem is looking at. What's your experience like there?
Yeah, I think you're right that most customers are getting to grips with commitments now regularly and are doing it in a more organized format. And so they're looking for kind of how to optimize the resources they use. I think that is right. Because if you think back to RIs and savings plans have been around for a long time now. And so it's kind of like good to see that people are like, oh, we don't really need to talk about that as much. Like even evidenced by this show, I think we've only covered it twice. So we're kind of expecting that most people are kind of aware of this. But people in the chat, let us know. Do you still get into grips with savings plans? All right. Do you want more content on it? Or are you kind of looking into the more optimization stuff, see if the foundation's right? But what was the next one?
It kind of ties into the first one a little bit, and I'd be interested to get your kind of perspective on it too. But it seems like based on their data engineering personas are getting the most value out of the training and self-service reporting that the FinOps Foundation puts out. And I assume that is kind of some of the self-service, teach yourself how to fish, kind of training and learning paths that are on the FinOps Foundation's website, which are all excellent. And some of that self-service reporting is likely kind of cloud reporting, either Cost Explorer, AWS tooling, or kind of similar for other vendors. So I'm wondering, since it seems like the engineers are getting their feet a little bit more wet, if that is going to kind of compound with the non-compute spend optimization, and if we're going to see kind of more of the engineering staff leaning in and taking a lead role in some of those optimization activities for the other services. That's pure
Yeah.
speculation. So tell me if I'm
No,
crazy.
I mean let's dive into that one a little bit. So engineering percent is getting more value from FinOps. So I'm gonna bring us back into the frame. We'll touch back on the last one in a sec. But no, I really agree. That's an interesting way that things are like the shift left concept, isn't
Yeah.
it? That's happening, and there's more tools in general that are leaning towards developers getting more access to data. But also like the reporting, I think is right. If we think of things like Kudos, shout out CIDs, then things like row level security in there or creating dashboards so easily and effectively and quickly, it just means that more people can see it. Also, just going to say, if you do want more of this, raise that PRFAQ. I thought this might make even more developers look at data because it's spot by OU. That's one of the things I've seen is that OUs like breaking it up into groups would be good. But yeah, I think that's an interesting transition that because last year it was getting developers to take action was the
Yeah.
biggest challenge.
Now they're taking action, hopefully. Or at least they're
Yeah, and
leaning in a little bit, which is exciting.
yeah, and it's like moving the dial a little bit. Just in general, the I don't know about you, but I'm having more conversations with developers. Are you doing that
Mhm.
more when you're on the ground with customers?
Yeah, I would say so. It depends a little bit on the situation. I would say the business units that are starting to really experiment more with AWS post migration, when they're in a situation where they can now play around and build natively, a lot of them are really leaning in a lot more. I would say during that transition period, sometimes there's a little bit of a resistance to really upskill significantly on the cost part of the equation, because it's not really the top priority when you're lift and shifting. You're just trying to get everything out of that data center. But as kind of that maturity increases, you definitely see a little bit more kind of engagement there. And I would say a lot of the way that we've structured some of our tooling now helps with that a lot. Like if you think about Compute Optimizer, the fact that Trusted Advisor kind of links out to a lot of the tools and uses a very similar engine to all of the like cost reporting tools really helps out with that. It's not just that kind of billing suite that only lives behind the billing console wall, right? We've got the unified cost management console, we've got cost optimization hub now, and it's really kind of letting more folks get involved. At least that's what I've seen.
Yeah. It's pushing that data in front of people's faces, not in in an overstepping way, but kind of giving people access. And also, I always bring this up with Compute Optimizer, things like the CloudWatch metrics being right there.
Yeah.
So if you think about transition over time of when we first started to release things like right sizing recommendations or trusted advisor recommendations, they just seem to be like a number or a suggestion that there wasn't backed up by as much data. And now it's definitely like, here are the facts, here's the information, here are the steps that you can kind of take to kind of continue with it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
all the new improvements that they launched during reInvent, I feel like are really supercharging that direction as well. Like if you think about the ability to select certain instance families and instance types that are output in that recommendation, if you have a dev team that's only tested on a certain instance type or is very committed to a certain instance type, you can customize those outputs to make it really kind of tailor made to what exactly you're doing. Additionally, I think kind of the adjustments with headroom and the thresholds can help people get engaged and get the wheels turning a little bit more in an engineering perspective, because you can see kind of in like a very user-friendly graph, what does this actually mean when we're triggering on a certain CPU? If I adjust it, dial it down, dial it up, what's right for my environment there?
Yeah. Okay, what was Richard, do you want to bring up the third point in the presentation back, so we do a third point. Sometimes I realize people can't see Richard. So it's just like I'm talking, I'm like, Richard, it's like they think I'm just like going delusional if there's somebody else. So the third one, forecasting.
Yeah, I don't know how surprising this is, but I think it's definitely worth talking about, because this is definitely a thing that I've heard raised a lot. And Steph, I know you did a whole reInvent talk on forecasting and
That was nice.
anticipating costs last year and trying to kind of get everybody's brain around how to think about that. But I continue to see it be more of a priority, especially, excuse me, in such a cost-conscious environment right now. So what are your thoughts here? And is there anything that you're excited about in 2024 here?
I think the forecasting one is always so hard. I'm just going to drop the YouTube link there for the forecasting chat we did at reInvent. There's some people I've spoken to who have kind of been able to get forecasting down to like a 1% variance, and it just astounds me. I think it's really tricky, just because of the variable model that is the cloud. That's not what people want to hear from me. I think is always people are like, no, tell me how to do it. How do you do it accurately? And I think that it boils down to people. What's probably happening is, and I'm assuming this from the data, is that people have moved to the cloud. Yes, we're on the cloud. Number two, we started spending money on the cloud. Number three, we start panicking about the money. And so we need to make sure we're tracking it, because a lot of people have that initial kind of, oh, we're doing stuff, we're going to be spending, we need to migrate. No one's planning for the future. And then suddenly they're getting kind of top down. We need to know what's going to happen. Why is it so different? And I think that asking that question of why do you need to forecast is going to be a big part of that. And just saying you need to forecast is such a generic, it's like saving money. It's like, why do you need to save money? Or how do you want to do this? Frank has just posted, forecasting for SAP workloads is easy. Not really. That is something I do not know about. But yeah, so I think if anyone, this is a good actual kind of a little segue, I think, as well. If anybody watching wants to come on the show or has an idea for a section, then we always want to hear from everybody. And we have a new, while I try and find it, new pulse survey. Just fill this in. You don't have to specify if you want to come on. It could just be anonymous. But if you have an idea, if you want us to talk more about forecasting, or if there's a subject that we haven't covered before that you want to talk about, or if you do want to come on and share your story, maybe you're one of these people who's like, I know how to forecast. Why are these people not struggling with forecasting? Then come on, because that would be great. So I just wanted to highlight that. And that link and all links will be in the show notes for anywhere that you're seeing this video after. But yeah, the forecasting thing, do you have a lot of conversations with customers about it?
I would say I've been having more frequently, and it's a lot of asking about how their peers do it, which I think is especially difficult for forecasting specifically, because it's kind of a curveball depending on what your workloads look like. Like it is so variable based on your business, whether or not it's going to be an easy challenge or a hard challenge for you. And so when you are a customer and your first instinct is to say, okay, how are other customers doing this? If you talk to a business that is in a very different kind of space that you are in, or in the middle of a migration, or has a very seasonal workload and you don't have a very seasonal workload that you can anticipate, like that can change the calculus very significantly. So I would say in terms of like how you can learn from others, you're a little bit more limited in the forecasting space. in certain scenarios, which probably adds to some of that complexity. And at the end of the day, it's what makes it such a hard problem.
Definitely. But kind of the big advice we had at reInvent was like, have a go. I think people get analysis paralysis, as a classic phrase, for forecasting, because it seems a bit like, what if I'm wrong? And I'm like, what if you're wrong? Like, just have a go. Try things out, see if you're wrong, like, at least you're one step closer to knowing how to be right. I think that's a kind of a good summary of it. Okay. Did you have other slides?
There are 2 slides. There's a second
Two slides. Let's bring this back up. Here we go.
All right. These are the ones that I think were a little bit more expected. At least I was not super surprised to see them, but are still interesting for sure. So I don't know if you've seen this in kind of the work that you do or kind of what we saw at reInvent or just talking to the community, but the kind of ability to dive into Gen AI and AI in general is kind of varied throughout the ecosystem, right? Certain people who have a really strong use case for it and who are kind of large enough to have the funds and the skill set to start experimenting are really diving in, and that's impacting their bottom, like their bill pretty significantly. Whereas others are still kind of dipping their toe in the water and haven't gotten quite to the all in on AI or Gen AI yet phase. So.
Yeah, I'm like surprised, but also not surprised that Gen AI has made its way into the State of FinOps. Like, for a fun anecdote, there was at reInvent, I was stopped by a camera crew just walking through the exhibition thing and asked a random question that was like, what's like an exciting announcement? And I literally just said the words Gen AI, and then I was on an internal video about reInvent, and everyone was like, why are you on this video talking about Gen AI? And I was like, I don't know. I didn't know. I just said the word Gen AI, and suddenly I was like on a video. So I am surprised. I mean, don't worry, guys. We are looking into doing some more content about Gen AI, of course, because we can't be the only ones not doing it. So let us know if you think that's going to be something that's exciting and interesting. Just to go back onto the point about forecasting, a great comment here from Robert. The first step to being great at something is being dog snot terrible.
Love.
What a phrase. What a phrase. Okay, continue on, Savanna.
One last thing about Gen AI, the FinOps Foundation actually did post a pretty extensive white paper on how to start thinking about Gen AI costs and forecasting them. So highly recommend checking that out if you haven't already. It's a great resource.
Love it. Okay.
What else is in here? Okay, so the next 2 kind of go hand in hand, at least in my brain. Anomalies are still a big priority. So whenever there is a spend spike or a spend drop, just understanding what that was. But it seems like we're getting a lot better at determining those root causes really quickly. So that is great to hear. And kind of thinking to how the AWS tooling works, we have a tool called Anomaly Detection and Budgets tool. Both of those are kind of an automated mechanism to flag if there is an anomaly. But kind of going on to the next one, humans are still in the loop for most automation. I would say that matches what I've seen with anomaly detection through both of those tools, right? So the tool can detect it, but you as the user often have to kind of, as a FinOps professional, go in there, do a little bit more digging, reach out to the team and connect the dots between the engineering staff who are actually the ones hands on keyboard who can make the change to either resolve it or tell you it's okay, and the tool that's saying, hey, something's different.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think that's how people want it to be still, right? There needs to be some decision-making aspect to stuff. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. You want to make sure that there's some eyes over it, especially for optimization or changes to an environment. I'm on that brink of being like, just let the computer deal with it. And then also people don't trust the machines. So I'm sure there's a reference to some sci-fi I could make there, but I'm not sure what it is. But yeah, I think it's still interesting that the humans are still a part of it. And I wonder in the future, what will be the first to be fully automated? I'm sure there's going to be some kind of things that have already starting to change. So it will be interesting to see how it goes.
Yeah, absolutely. Hopefully we'll at least have some dev and test environments on the automation train so we can start trying it out. Yeah.
Okay, and the last one? Oh, keep reducing waste. Yes.
Yeah. Key priorities, reducing waste and managing commitments. I would be shocked if that's not top of the key priorities every year, to be honest. Those are both kind of the constant thing that you have to keep an eye on and manage and do. while you're
Mhm.
in the cloud, certainly. And I will say, like, I think at this point, uh, at least the folks that I work with have a pretty good like detection mechanism and process and rhythm going for both of those. And as we kind of saw with the fact that it seems like developer staff is leaning in a little bit more, hopefully that's something that can come together and kind of be a force multiplier in doing that cleanup.
Mhm. Asking the question, do you need that, is still something that we have to say to customers all the time. And I think that and it all kind of links, right? The Gen AI stuff, the forecasting, it's all coming together as the problems are still similar, but hopefully we're trying to attack it in a more serious way. And with devs being more involved, asking the question, do you need that for kind of idle resources or wasteful resources? They should be able to answer quicker. So I feel like it's similar problems to previously, but I think we're
Mhm.
moving into a good direction of how to solve them. So there's,
Yeah.
there's still some good stuff to come.
Flash question for you, Steph. What's your
Oh,
favorite resource or service to do cleanup on?
oh, it's always elastic IPs. It's my
Oh, really?
it's the smallest
Interesting.
one. It's just because I used to the number is like $3.36 a month for elastic
Mm,
IP because it's 0.006 something, I think, for like the 6.5 for an hour, how much it costs. It's like nothing. But if you find it, it's more often than not like literally like there's just not being used. And
mm,
so the bigger the organization, the more times it happened. And it's just such an easy and Robert agrees with me, like they're the easiest ever low hanging fruit. And it's one of those, it's more because it's it's a good price memory. Thanks, Frank. I think it's something like that. Someone validate me if that's the right number. It's definitely 3.36 because I'd be like, it's the price of a coffee, depending on where you get your coffee from. Um, but it was just always such a signifier to me if I went into a customer or when I was doing it in accounts when I was at KPMG, if there were idle resources that were elastic IPs, the most basic of thing, then it was a bit of a flag that maybe people weren't aware of what would cause idle and also an awareness of like a problem maybe. The same thing for idle volumes. If there's like a lot of like an extremely large amount of idle volumes, it's often more of a flag that something might be wrong and there might be a broken process that would be doing this. And so that's why I'd like to find them, because sometimes it opens up a bigger picture that people weren't aware of. And it's more of a story point than just a selling of a number. And it can also help you change your mindset because you're like, this is so simple, just this one little thing, and it will save some money. And people find it also quite an easy one to do. So if you delete it, they're like, oh, I saved some money. Look how easy that was. It's like a first step. What about you?
I'm gonna go retro here, and again, this is like really showing my age because compute savings points have been around since 2019. But one of I think the most like immediately satisfying things to do from my perspective is if you find somebody who has a bunch of convertible RIs that they just need to convert, and you
Mm.
can walk them through the process of essentially like converting that convertible
Ah.
RI to what they're actually using now, and
Mhm.
then educate them on compute savings plans and kind of the other product offerings. That's always really fun to do because it's kind of like a
Yeah.
puzzle to figure out exactly like how to take the leases that you have and map it into what it's going to be, and it can definitely make the utilization graph like look really exciting after you finish doing it. So
Boom. Anything that makes a big like boom 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 on your
anything that makes the
pricing.
graph go, I'm like, yes.
Yeah.
Graph is edit.
It's the days I remember like when I got rid of the cloud trail spend before, and it was
Ooh,
just such a like dump, like a
yep,
massive drop that
yep,
was
yep.
so just like satisfying. And I would go to it and just look at it and be like, I'm so happy. It's like my reverse of my bank balance. Well, my bank like opening the reverse of my bank balance.
Yeah, cloud trail's fun too because like there are a lot of times when you can get it all the way down to zero. So it like really
Mm,
is just all the way off the cliff.
yeah. It's
The
always pretty
other thing,
satisfying.
and this is definitely something that is a lot harder to do, but has like a crazy impact, is if you can get folks on board with scaling stuff down over the weekends. That is really exciting too.
Mm.
And you can really see the like EC2 running hours just drop on Saturday, Sunday every weekend going forward after they set it up. It's great. Very satisfying.
Thank you everyone for commenting, chatting. As always, if you have any other questions, comments, feel free to email us. And yeah, that is it. That is all. I'm trying to get myself ready to close. Thanks, Savannah. Thanks, Frank, for coming on earlier. And we'll see you guys next week. Bye.